Hi, good morning, and welcome back. I'm so glad to be with you this month. My name is Dr. Mary Ann Shepard, and I am presenting you this information this month. Our series this month is on reinforcement. We talk a lot about reinforcement. We've talked about it in many different capacities. Specifically, we've talked about it as an antecedent strategy, a consequence strategy, and we've also talked about functions of behavior and how that plays into selecting your reinforcers. This week, or this month, we're going to talk about some additional special considerations in reinforcement. So we're going to talk about what is reinforcement? Reinforcement is anything that increases the future frequency of behavior. So it could be yelling, could be reinforcing. And so we've talked about before that attention and the intensity and the thrill of getting a reaction out of somebody can be exciting, and so yelling can be reinforcement. Food can be reinforcement. I personally am highly motivated by food, and so if somebody says, hey, as soon as you get that done, I'll get you a cookie, I'm like, okay, let me hurry up and get it done because I love my cookies. So food can be reinforcing. Attention, just a good job, a way to go, a sit down, hey, let's talk about how well you've been doing. If your boss comes to you and they say, oh my goodness, I'm so impressed with the job you've been doing lately, how exciting is that? How reinforcing is that? It gives you that extra boost you need to continue doing well with your job. So just attention can be reinforcing. So reinforcement does not have to be a tangible item. Now, reinforcement can be money. If you were not paid, would you go to your job every day, or do you go to your job because you get paid to do your work? So reinforcement, we live in a society and we learn through reinforcement. A lot of times people are like, well, isn't this kind of like training an animal or dogs? My response is humans are an organism. We are an organism just like any other organism, whether that's a fish or like a whale or a dog, but we all learn through feedback. So that feedback can be positive, that feedback can be negative. And reinforcement is feedback that leads to the individual or the organism doing that same behavior again in the future. Now, animals tend to rely on primary reinforcers like pets on the back or food, whereas humans might be able to rely on secondary reinforcers like tokens or money. But we also do rely on things like food or verbal praise, verbal recognition, physical attention. So reinforcement does not have to be considered negative or bad. It is considered feedback, and that feedback, it's feedback that increases the likelihood of that behavior again in the future. Okay, so you shouldn't be afraid of reinforcement. We're going to talk a little bit in this series about bribery versus reinforcement. You want to make sure that when you're doing reinforcement or when you're using reinforcement, that you're using it as reinforcement and not as bribery. And you also want to look at ways to manipulate your reinforcement so that it becomes more effective or more powerful. So when you're looking at reinforcement, how can you look at the schedule at which you're providing that reinforcement? It doesn't have to be every time the individual does something that you want them to. You want to be aware of different schedules of reinforcement have different advantages and disadvantages. So some schedules of reinforcement have what's called a post-reinforcement pause, which is a dip in behavior right after they receive reinforcement. This is normal, this is natural. Right after a big final or a big test or a job review or any major project you've been working on, you will see a dip in your behavior before you go back to work or go back to studying. And so that break or that dip shouldn't be feared or it shouldn't be considered that the reinforcement isn't working. In fact, it tells you that it did work, but you should be aware of those caveats in reinforcement. We're going to talk about something called satiation and deprivation. So when you've had too much of something, so if I've had too many cookies, I'm not going to want any more cookies. Whereas if I haven't had a cookie in like 2 weeks or a month, I'm really going to be craving a cookie and find that that is a very powerful reinforcer to me, something that I might be willing to work harder for. So how do you utilize that satiation and deprivation? Specifically with satiation, how can you use non-contingent reinforcement to satiate an individual on something that maybe they're engaging in negative behaviors to access? And so how can you use that as an antecedent strategy? And we'll also talk about using choice as a reward. So choice in and of itself, some individuals really like that control and that freedom to choose. And so how can you use that freedom to choose as a reward? So those are things that we're going to talk about and special considerations to use in reinforcement. I look forward to talking to you about all of these things this month. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out in the comments or reach out to us on Facebook or on YouTube. And you can follow us on Facebook at Everyday Behaviors with Dr. Mary Ann, or you can also follow us on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to like us or follow us on YouTube. And you can also visit our website at www.everydaybehaviors.com. Thank you. See you soon.